We're right, mystery fans. Ready for another deep dive. This time we're tackling the art of planting clues in a mystery novel. It's all about those tricky little breadcrumbs that lead to the truth. But they can also send readers down the wrong path if you're clever.
Oh, absolutely. It's a delicate balance between giving enough away and holding back just enough to keep them guessing.
Exactly. And we've got a really interesting mix of sources to work with today. We've got an article about writing crime novels, some kind of like instructions for a mystery project, excerpts from a novel in progress, and get this, even some stuff about the history of rocks.
Rocks.
Rocks. Sounds kind of random, right? But trust me, it'll all make sense.
All right, I'm intrigued. So what's the mission for this deep dive? What do we want to equip our listeners to do by the end of this?
I'm thinking by the time we wrap this up, our listeners should be able to plant clues like a seasoned mystery writer.
Yeah,
Keep those readers guessing, but play fair.
love it. Planting clues is well, it's like setting a trap, right? You need to make it enticing enough for the prey to fall for it, but not so obvious that they see it coming a mile away.
Ooh, that's a good one. And it reminds me of this little tidbit I found fascinating. It was in Comment les insectes ont conquis la Terre from the Natural History Museum in Paris.
Okay.
You know how sometimes insects get trapped in amber for like millions of years? They're perfectly preserved, like little snapshots of the past.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking clues in a mystery can be like those amber bubbles. They preserve information, a moment in time. And so to the detective, or in this case, the reader, to kind of like decipher what it all means.
I like that. Clues as amber bubbles. So how do we as writers create those amber bubbles? Where do we even begin?
Good question. Let's start with the basics. There's this article from Curtis Brown Creative that breaks down clues into three main types: physical, verbal, and circumstantial.
Classic categories.
Yeah, and each one has its own strengths and challenges, right?
For sure.
Let's start with physical clues. Those seem the most straightforward, like the fingerprints, the weapon, the dropped handkerchief.
Right, the classic stuff. But even with physical clues, it's not just about the object itself. It's about how you describe it, what details you choose to emphasize or downplay.
So it's not just about what the clue is, but how it's presented.
Exactly.
I like that. Now, verbal clues, on the other hand, those feel trickier.
Yeah, verbal clues are all about subtlety and nuance. Think about dialogue, a character's internal thoughts, even just snippets of conversation they overhear. It's got to feel natural, not forced or like you're hitting the reader over the head with a clue bat.
Okay, so how do you do that? How do you plant a verbal clue without being too obvious about it?
Let's say you have a character who's lying about their alibi. Instead of having them just blur out, "I wasn't there," maybe they make an offhand comment that contradicts something they said earlier or reveals a detail they shouldn't know.
It's like a little crack in their facade that the reader might not even notice at first.
Exactly.
But later on, it becomes a huge red flag.
Exactly. And you can do so much with those tiny inconsistencies. It builds suspicion, keeps the reader wondering if this person is just a red herring or if they're really involved.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all comes together. We're building this web of clues, some obvious, some hidden, and it's all leading the reader down a specific path. But how to make sure they don't get totally lost along the way?
That's where circumstantial clues come in. These are the ones that rely on suggestion and implication. You're not directly stating anything, but you're creating connections that point towards a certain conclusion.
It's like you're planting seeds of doubt rather than just coming right out and saying, hey, this is a clue.
Exactly. Think about it. You might have a character who's acting all nervous after a crime, or someone who was seen near the crime scene. Does that automatically mean they're guilty? Not necessarily.
Just makes you wonder, like, is this person just a red herring, or are they really involved?
Right. And that brings us to foreshadowing. Let's look at the novel in progress we have here. There's this little detail in the first scene that caught my eye. It's about this stolen stone with a unique inscription, "The Secret of Life."
Okay. Sounds intriguing, but how does that work as foreshadowing?
Well, at first glance, it might seem like just a historical detail, a bit of background about the artifact. But as the story unfolds, that inscription could become a recurring motif. You could have it pop up in different contexts, maybe even take on new layers of meaning.
So it's not just about what the inscription says, but how it's used throughout the story.
Exactly. It could be a source of verbal clues, a clue to the thief's motive, maybe even a red herring to throw everyone off track.
And that brings us to the setting. This novel uses some really interesting real-world locations, like the Place Vendôme, known for its fancy jewelry shops, and the Quai des Orfèvres, which is the headquarters of the Paris police.
Those locations are more than just backdrops. They're practically characters themselves. And they offer a ton of possibilities for planting clues that feel organic and believable.
Totally. It's like those details ground the story in reality, but also give you all these opportunities for clever clue planting. And speaking of believable, the novel mentions that the museum's security system was modeled after Cartier's.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And Cartier is known for having super sophisticated security. Yet somehow, the thief managed to bypass it completely.
That's huge. It suggests that whoever pulled this off had some serious inside knowledge. A programmer, maybe? Or someone who knows the system's weaknesses. It immediately narrows down your pool of suspects and adds another layer to the mystery.
So we're not dealing with some random thief who got lucky. This was carefully planned and executed. Which leads us to the big question, the WHY. What was the thief's motive?
Ah, motivation. The engine that drives every crime. Was it simply about the money? Or could there be something more at play here? Maybe that inscription, the secret of life, holds a deeper meaning for the thief.
Okay, now we're getting into some really interesting territory. It's not just about solving a puzzle anymore. It's about getting inside the mind of the criminal, figuring out what makes them tick.
And that understanding is crucial when you're planting clues. You need to make sure they're clever, but also psychologically believable. A desperate thief might leave obvious, sloppy clues, while a mastermind would create subtle red herrings.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. We've covered so much. Different types of clues, the importance of setting, the role of motivation. And I feel like we're just getting started.
You're absolutely right. There's so much more to explore, so many more techniques for crafting clues that will keep your readers on the edge of their seats.
This is all so exciting. I can't wait to dive into the next layer.
Let's do it. We'll be back soon with even more insights into the art of planting clues in your mystery novel.